So this is episode 1 of our as yet to be named podcast, and we will worry about a name after the event. But we are here, as we will be hopefully most weeks, to talk about the crypto asset financial promotion rules, how firms can navigate them, what they mean, what interesting use cases are out there, and what we are learning from the regulator as they publish content and as things develop. And of course, we're just broadly here to be two people who are having a good time and a chat.
And of course, Gareth, it's worth mentioning that what we don't want to do and what we won't want people to think is going to happen every week is we start rattling off rule references to people, because we understand nobody wants to hear that any more than we want to be quoting rule references. So we're more concerned with what it actually means for businesses in a practical sense. And we'll want to be talking as much as we can in a regulatory sense about opportunities as much as we are about what needs to be done to take advantage of those.
Yeah, and if I find myself falling asleep, then we've probably gone wrong somewhere, right? So we will try and keep this interesting, I promise. But probably a good starting point, as this is episode 1, to talk about what the rules actually are, why they're here and what they do, just to lay the foundations really for what then follows. So Wayne, do you want to do the 101?
So up until late last year, there was very little regulation for any kind of crypto activity in the UK, and the first real step in after the money laundering regs piece of work from the FCA was the financial promotions regime, which essentially means that if any firm now wants to promote crypto assets in the UK to retail investors, then they're going to need someone who's authorised in the UK to approve and sign off those promotions for them, which is why we're here doing what it is that Engelbert's doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. And it's worth saying that what we're talking about here when we're talking about financial promotions, right, which is really what we care about in this context, is any content which invites or induces someone to engage in crypto asset investment activity. And you might be saying, well, okay, fine, that's all well and good, but hey, we're sat in the US, or here we're sat in Singapore, or wherever. Why do we care? And the reality is that is a matter that still affects you. Any promotion that is effective in the UK, as in it can be used by a UK person, irrespective of where it's come from, is core. And it's maybe worth 2 seconds on what it means to get it wrong and what the consequences are. I don't know, Wayne, do you want to sort of chip in on that?
It's not. There's two elements to what happens, right? So there's the legal and the compliance aspects of what happens if you get it wrong. So we've seen, and we can show later, a whole list of firms that haven't met rules or have done things that the FCA doesn't like. And so they'll publish warning notices, and so out there in the public domain is your company name listed as a bad actor, essentially. So you've got a warning notice. That's pretty bad PR. You probably also get some pretty strongly worded letters from the UK regulator too, telling that you're issuing illegal promotions. So there's the legal aspect to it, and you're going to have to obviously react to that one way or another by closing stuff down, by responding. It's going to cost money for legal representation, more than likely. But then separately, there's the commercial risk too, the reputational risk. So if you're a business that wants to capture the UK market, and remember the market just shrank because there are fewer people who are able and willing to meet the regs than there were previously when regs didn't exist. So if you want to capture that market share, then you want to do that pretty soon and be seen to be doing things properly right from the off, rather than skirting along trying to avoid compliance and the rules in the UK and hoping you'll get away with it, because the reality is you won't, and then there you are, your name's on a warning list, everybody sees that, and now your job in the future just got a whole lot harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the double dunker is that it is a criminal offence as well, up to 2 years in prison, potential unlimited fines, and I think the FCA came out and said any revenue you make from illegal promotions is effectively a proceed of crime, and that means money laundering, and so you could be hit with a money laundering offence as well. So it's pretty robust, this stuff, and it does matter. But the funny thing is, and I think Wayne would agree, is that the compliance with this is so easy, right? I mean, ultimately, make sure your content's okay. Find an approver if you aren't an authorised firm in the UK and get it signed off. It's a matter of a contract more than it is a matter of anything more severe. Of course, like, we'll talk about good governance. God, that's going to be a fun episode. But we'll talk about good governance and what that means, and what that you sort of should put in place to make things work well and smoothly. But other than that, this is a 5% headache. It's not your main concern. It's not the 80% of your problems.
And like any regulation, right? There's reading the rules and finding out what you need to do by somebody who's telling you what you need to do, which doesn't always feel very attractive when you're an innovative new commercial enterprise. But if you try and frame it a little bit differently and just think of it as a reasonable business strategy, so do I want the whole market I'm operating in and my business to be just free to do and say whatever it wants and whatever I want? And actually, most industries, in fact all industries, have some degree of regulation involved in them, and it's there usually for a reason. It's usually born out of something that's gone pretty bad, and people don't want the bad things to happen a second time round. So if what they ask is that you make sure the customers you're talking to know what it is you're talking to them about, and that they're not getting into something completely oblivious to what the risk might be. They get carried away, people start losing money because they don't know who to turn to or what to invest in or not to invest in. Then that's not going to reflect very well on the businesses involved or the market as a whole. So it does start to give some credibility, and I usually find it helps to think about it in business strategy, customer marketing terms, rather than purely from a list of things I'm not allowed to do, because that never feels very nice, does it?
Yeah, it's, and I'm going to steal your phrase here, but it's like business 101, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't tell me who you're marketing to and what you're selling them and why it's good value, then you've probably not got a great business to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, all right, so let's then think about what the main challenges are of this regime for firms that want to comply and do things right. And I'll see how many times we can not say the word comply over the course of this series. But what are the main challenges that firms are going to have to think about when it comes to getting this right?
It's a bit of it's a series of stages, I think, of emotions to begin with. So why do I have to do this? I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm in denial, I'm in acceptance, and then I'm just running with it and doing it. And I think it's the same for every business, every piece of regulation, not just this one. So we've been around regulated businesses forever. Gareth and I, we've seen this happen lots and lots of times for them. And it's not really much different here. So the big challenge really is firstly identifying that there is a thing that you need to do now if you want to promote and operate into the UK, never mind in the UK. And then secondly, just getting your head around what that actually means and what that looks like, and why you might find usefulness in it, as opposed to just it being a set of restrictions that you didn't have yesterday. So it's like any change management. The first piece is getting buy-in, understanding what it is, and then you can start to work through the detail, which, go on, Gareth, you can talk to us a little bit about the challenges with the detail, because there are plenty of those.
Yeah, and so let's break this down, because there's a number of phases here. There's two types of promotion, and that's one thing that we really need to understand. There's what you would normally consider to be marketing material. Anything that sort of says, hey, come and use our service, come and buy our thing, come and see what we're up to, maybe you'd like to then come and buy it. So that's a first type of promotion, a normal type of promotion. And then there's a select special type of promotion that's reserved where there's a standard form of response. So back in the old days, right, that would have been a newspaper cutout. You'd write your name and address, you'd attach your check, you'd send it in the post, and the next thing you know, you'd be sent some shares in a company by way of certificate or whatever. That was your standard form of response back then. The rules haven't really changed since that time, but the technology and the ability to deliver services has, and so what it means now is where you've got a button that allows you to transact. So if it's a buy button, if it's a sell button, if it's an exchange button, that will be also considered to be a promotion, and so that brings in scope like app screens, website screens that do that. So then you've got that level of promotion. So we've got to think about those two separately. For all promotions, it's important that your content is like fair and clear and not misleading. And we've actually got some guidance that we're going to publish, I think, today or tomorrow on our website, and we'll link to it in the notes, which runs through what fair, clear, and not misleading means in the context of a promotion. And there's loads and loads and loads of things we could say about it, but ultimately just take it on its face. Like, if you're saying something about what you're doing or your product, can you actually sit there and say it's fair, or it's clear, or you've not misled somebody about what you're selling them? Because this is ultimately a financial product, and you just can't sell things that are inappropriate or that you've missold. It's just you will end up in a lawsuit ultimately. So that's the general rule that applies to all promotions. But then those special category ones, those ones that are, what they're called direct offer financial promotions, ones that have a standard form of response, they have additional rules. And so you can't show a direct offer financial promotion until someone has requested to see it, and you've waited 24 hours for them to have a think about whether they still want to see it after that period of time, so that they can sleep on it. You've got no FOMO, not trying to make impulsive decisions. So you've got a 24-hour cooling off period from requesting to see the promotion to actually seeing it. You've got to have a personalised risk warning that says, oh, hey, Wayne, did you know you're about to lose all your money? Take 2 minutes to learn more. You've got an appropriateness assessment, which is a set of quiz questions ultimately that allows me as a user to prove to you that I understand what I'm about to buy from you or what I'm about to do from you. So it's really important that there's a lot of educational and informative content up front before you get to that stage. And then the last is an investor categorisation. So I would have to tell you, for instance, whether I'm a high net worth individual, a sophisticated investor, or whether I'm restricted, like no other sort of sophisticated level of category applies to me, and therefore I should be treated as a restricted user with certain caps on the investment of my net worth. So the guidance is that or the requirement is that you shouldn't invest more than 10% of your net assets if you are a restricted investor, and that you shouldn't have done so in the last 12 months, and that you confirm that you won't in the next 12 months. And there's a build there, there's a product build, right?
And you've touched on a couple of interesting points there, right? Between the more prescribed requirements, so when you talk about cooling off periods and 24 hours, the need for appropriateness tests, etc., risk warnings, disclaimers, a stamp saying who's approved it, there are some quite prescribed elements, and I think some firms find it a bit easier to grapple with that because it's almost like a set of instructions. But then within the regime, and even within digging deeper into some of those prescribed elements, there's stuff that's way more subjective. So when you reference clear, fair, and not misleading, as you say, we've got some guidance we'll issue on that, but that then starts to be something that needs a little more thinking about. It's not prescribed, and so it can be difficult to work out what's okay and what's not okay, and really you've just got to be confident in your assessment of that, and then be clear, document why you think it's okay. And the biggest challenge on that clear, fair, and not misleading, and is it understandable, etc., is remembering that what to us and to people who run these businesses is clear is way different to what the sort of average customer might think is clear. So when you're working in crypto all day, every day for a number of years, you think, of course, everybody knows what a layer one blockchain is, but the reality is a normal average person on the street is not going to have a clue what that means. So you've really almost got to step back the complexity in the words you use, and then step back again because you've probably not gone far enough. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, is that kind of internal debate between people within the industry as to, is this clear, is this misleading, is it fair, is it understandable, have we met what the appropriateness questions should actually look like, or have we not gone far enough, or do we think we've gone too far? And that's the bit that can be the harder one to grapple with, I think.
Yeah, because there's a hell of a lot of jargon in this space, right? And the biggest issue that most projects face is that they're developed by geniuses, right? I mean, you're talking about advanced level cryptography being applied to all kinds of use cases, and the tokens facilitating things like automated market makers and liquidity providers and decentralized compute storage, and that sort of stuff just isn't understood by the average person. And then layer on top of that what the token actually does in that ecosystem, and is it a governance token? Does it have some utility? Is it part of the rewards system or the staking and validation system of what you're building? Even explaining that is quite complex. And then when you start thinking about, well, can I explain that to someone with a reading age of like 13? Probably not. And so then that's why the regulators come out and said these are high risk investments, and it may not always be appropriate that they're available to retail. We are allowing them to be made available to retail, but subject to certain restrictions, and those restrictions are the FinCon rules, the rules that say your content has to be really, really clear and fair and not misleading, and make it clear why you're providing the level of support that you're providing, or why you're assessing the value as being appropriate for the thing you're selling. So there's a lot of little nuances in there. But at the end of the day, we talked a lot about challenges, we talked a lot about like governance and the structures that you have to put in place and product builds that you will need. But the ultimate question is this regime and what comes as a result of it an opportunity or a hindrance, as it sort of used quite a lot of negative terminology so far. So, which of those is it, and how do we sort of think about that in this context?
Definitely, and look, you can't change what's happening. You can only change how you react to it, right? So, as we said before, it does put restrictions on what can be done, but in doing so, it makes market entry harder. So that market still exists in the UK and is growing. So the people that get it right have got a bigger opportunity than they had previously, because the competition is not going to keep pace. So I definitely think there's certainly big opportunity there, although it doesn't always feel like it at the outset. And then secondly, as it gets more embedded, and the fact that there's regulation in place now and people are thinking about clear and doing the right thing, etc., just gives the market more credibility. And the more credibility it has, the more adoption it will see, and the more people will be increasingly confident in taking part in that market. Exactly like we've seen with the Bitcoin ETFs, it's had a big impact on that. It's the same thing here, but maybe a year or two further back in the timeline. So for sure, it feels like there's more work to do, but hey, all of the best opportunities require some effort, and so definitely there's good things to be achieved.
I mean, I've spoken to people across Europe who are rubbing their hands and saying, "Oh, great! The UK's dead now. That's fine. We can now take that market." The reality is, I mean, as we said earlier, this is like a minor compliance headache in a way. If you can get this right, and there's no reason you shouldn't, because ultimately it's just about good marketing and what good marketing and business practice looks like. If you can get it right, then you are going to be so much better. You're going to set a standard as far as like communications are concerned in the industry, which there probably does need to improve. There's a lot of research required by even very knowledgeable and skilled people in the space to understand what certain projects are doing and how they achieve it, and that's probably not the right outcome for a lot of people that want to access the market. So I do think that there's an opportunity here in the UK to get this right, to nail it, to make sure that you're marketing in a way that works. And it's not like UK investors are just going to look at your project and be like, whoa, what's all these risk warnings? Of course I'm not going to touch that. Because everybody in the market that's marketing in a compliant way is doing the same thing. So people here just now know, if I touch a crypto platform, yes, I'm going to have to do an appropriateness assessment. Yes, I'm going to have to categorize myself. I'm going to see a load of risk warnings on screens. I'm going to see these things called approvers and why they've time-stamped certain materials. And then the complexity, to the extent that there is any, just comes in the nuance of how you apply the rules, and hopefully, what I'd like to do over the next few weeks with you, Wayne, is to chat through some of that detail, so that firms who want to comply, want to do it right, can really attack this properly. But I think that's probably enough to start with. I think we've covered off a good chunk there. So
yeah, definitely. And I think, look, we can't close out right without having a little bit of a sales message in here, really, because that's why we're trying to do some of this. But what I will say is that the fact that that nuance exists and that this is so critical to people that want to grab that market share in the UK, means who you work with to get that. It's pretty important, right? That's kind of why we're sharing this stuff, so we can help the industry get a bit better, and just sort of start to get a bit more comfortable with what's needed. But yeah, dealing with that nuance is the hard part, but get that right, and we can fly, right?